Good afternoon, everyone. Today's public hearing is convened under the provisions of the Local Government Act of British Columbia to hear submissions relative to the proposed bylaw. All persons who believe that their interest in property is affected by the proposed bylaw shall be given a reasonable opportunity to be heard respecting matters in the proposed bylaw. I would ask those members of the public who wish to speak to commence your address to this board by clearly stating your name. The board will not debate the matters of a proposed bylaw with individual citizens, but members may ask questions of you following your presentation. The main function of this public hearing is to listen to your views. No one will be or should feel discouraged or prevented from making their views heard. Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 2862, 2025 would amend bylaw number 2400 by rezoning the subject property on Red Lake, PID 014523922, from AF1 Agricultural Forestry Zone to LA1 Limited Access Cabin Zone to enable a renovation or replacement of a dry cabin. Ms. Corporate Officer, are there any further written submissions?
Thank you, Chair Roden. There have been no further written submissions.
Thank you. Are there any in-person submissions today? Anyone on Zoom wishing to speak? This is the first call for public submissions on this. I'm going to ask a second time if there are any further representations on this matter. Asking for a third and final time if there is anyone who wants to make representation. There being no further speakers, I declare this public hearing closed. Good afternoon, everyone. Bang, and welcome to this regular meeting of the Thompson-Nicola Regional District for Thursday, March 27th, 2025. Like to acknowledge that the TNRD acknowledges that we connect with many First Nations communities across our vast regional district, and today we are located on the traditional territory of the Tecumseh, situated within the unceded ancestral lands of the Secwepemc Nation. The TNRD appreciates the partnership that we have with Tecumseh and respects the territory and land on which we gather today. So congratulations and welcome to Director Rob Kerslake from Barrier, who was elected mayor of that community on March 1st. He has, of course, been the Barrier representative at this table before, but now on a more permanent basis. I also understand that Director Kerslake has just become a grandfather. And I understand that he will show you the pictures if you ask. If you pay him $20, he will not show you the pictures. So we have an update from, welcome to Director Haughton, who is joining us via the magic of technology. It is wonderful to see him here, even if it is just as a Zoom presence. And I'm sure I speak for the entire body when I say, Doug, we can't wait till you're back here in person. So please get well soon, but we're glad you're here with us today. Library update. The Thompson-Nicola Regional Library will be conducting hours of service surveys for both the Clinton and the Barrier libraries. Data collected via the library's website or in person will inform any changes to hours of operation and ensure that they are aligned to best serve the TNRD residents in the respective communities. Clinton's survey will be open in April, with Barrier's survey falling in May. So please consult the TNRL insert in your folder for more details, and please spread the word in those communities. Parks and Trails Strategic Plan, Round 2 of public consultation. The TNRD is inviting the public to review its draft Parks and Trails Strategic Plan and provide feedback in the upcoming weeks. So this is a chance for all residents to help to shape the future of TNRD Parks and Trails. The draft plan can be viewed on the TNRD website. It evaluates the TNRD's existing park assets and identifies future park development opportunities and makes recommendations as to what should be prioritized. Residents can take a short online survey, which is open until April 14th, or take part in a virtual open house to review the plan on April 8th from 6 to 7:30 p.m. The open house link and survey link can be found on the TNRD website. And for more information, go to tnrd.ca and click on the post under latest news. Proper battery disposal. The TNRD is also reminding residents that you have the power to properly dispose of household batteries. A joint message was recently issued with the City of Kamloops, Recycle BC, and Mterra after 3 separate fires at the Mterra recycling plant in Kamloops that were all caused by smoldering rechargeable batteries. All 3 fires were caused by material collected from properties within Kamloops city limits, but this is an important safety message across the TNRD, and all the household batteries we recycle end up at Mterra. All 27 TNRD eco depots and transfer stations accept household batteries free of charge to be recycled separate from all other materials, not just AAA and AA batteries. Rechargeable batteries must also be recycled here. These are found in things like hearing aids, fobs, smartwatches, laptops, cell phones, power tools, vaping pens, and many household items. Many locations in the City of Kamloops accept household batteries as well. Rechargeable lithium batteries are particularly dangerous because they are highly reactive and can spontaneously combust. So please do not put these batteries in your garbage or your curbside recycling. Take them to a depot where they will be disposed of and handled properly. So Chair's update, the TNRD is once again preparing a gift basket, which will be won by a very lucky person at the SILGA convention coming up in Merritt next month. As we did last year, we are asking all TNRD directors who feel so inclined to contribute an item that is representative of your area, electoral area or municipality, a local craft, an artisanal piece, a piece of artwork, something like honey or preserves. So please bring your item to the board meeting on April 17th. And Director Onslow has an example, I believe, of something, oh no, that has been beautifully wrapped, and I'm going to make her unwrap it. This, I believe, was created by Director Onslow's son. Could you just tell us something about this?
Yeah, so my husband is an artisan blacksmith when he feels like being one. And so he's taught my older boy how to make these roses. And so I just thought it was a nice thing to add into the Silga basket. And I will put more information that it's made by a 14-year-old boy who's learning the art of blacksmithing from Blue River, BC. So if anyone wants to look at it at some point, tell me how wonderful he did. You're welcome to do that. Yeah, that's right.
So yes, please, it is indeed a thing of beauty. So please go take a look at it, and it gives you an idea of the sort of thing representative of our beautiful regional district that, as I say, it's going to be a very fortunate person who wins this or gets this presented to them at SILGA. So upcoming meetings and events, April 16th, we have the Finance Committee, followed by Regional Solid Waste Management Committee later that day. On April 17th, we have Thompson-Nicola Invasive Plant Management Committee in the morning, followed by regular board meeting in the afternoon at 1:30. That is the day before Good Friday. On the 22nd of April, we have the Boundary Review Committee via Zoom. That starts at 9 in the morning. Among the upcoming events are Solid Waste Management Committee Tour on April 14th, MFA 2025 Annual General Meeting in Victoria, April 23rd, 24th, the SILGA Convention in Merritt, April 29th to May 2nd, and FCM at Rogers Centre in Ottawa, May 29th to June 1st. Today in your blue folders, you will find regular mail, Budget 2025 infographics, a copy of the letters sent regarding municipality-owned cannabis retail stores, a copy of a letter from Columbia Shuswap Regional District regarding changes to the Community Works Fund eligibility, a copy of the letter to ministers re communication with regional districts, which will be coming up later. And finally, As always, in the event of an emergency, if the fire alarm sounds, leave by the safest exit doors, either at the rear of the room or the main entrance, go down the staircase, exit the building, and assemble in the staff car park behind at the rear of the Paramount Theater. Do not run or use the elevators, and if you have issues with mobility, please advise the corporate officer. Are there any additions to or deletions from the agenda? All right, there are none. We move on to the minutes of the regular board meeting held on March the 6th. Thank you, Vice Chair Smith, seconded by Director Karpak. Are there any errors or omissions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That is carried. All right, we go on. I feel like I've missed something, but no, I have not. Bylaws from public hearing, 7.1 zoning amendment bylaw number 2862. We do have two recommendations. Director Thorpe, seconded by Director Grenier. That's recommendation 1. Any discussion on this? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That's carried. Director Ranta, thank you very much. Seconded by Director Sarai. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That is carried. We move on to delegations, invited presentations. It is my pleasure to welcome back Mario Piroddi of BDO Canada LLP. Mr. Piroddi, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. It's good to be back. And this time for our second presentation today, we are here to present the audited financial statements of the Thompson-Nicola Regional District for the December 31st, 2024 year end. Within your agenda package, you have the full version of the financial statements, which we'll be seeking approval for today, and also my report to the Board of Directors on the conduct of the audit. Before we jump into the audit report, again, I want to remind you that as your auditor, I am appointed by the board. Not even though myself and my team, we work with management, we are accountable to the board. So this is your opportunity to make sure that you're satisfied with the work that we've done and ask any questions, whether it is on the conduct of the audit or on the results in the financial statements. And of course, on the financial statement results, if there's a question that I can't answer, I will turn to CFO Fox for any clarifications as well. But as of today, our audit is substantially complete, and we are proposing a clean audit opinion. So the statements in your package do present fairly the results of the TNRD for the year ended December 31st, 2024. And so when we look at the financial results, we're going to start with the financial position and look at your assets and liabilities for the year. And what we could see is that it was a very stable year in terms of your finances, and you'll see that as a bit of a theme as we go through the presentation. Your total financial assets, so cash and investments you have or will be coming in, did increase by $2 million to $62.4 million. And then I'm going to avoid having you do some mental math if you're following along on the financial statements and highlight the liabilities that will come due in the next year, whether it's your accounts payable or deferred revenue, of $7 million versus $6.2 million last year. If we deduct that from your financial assets, we get to the net financial asset measure, excluding your debt and excluding asset retirement obligations, which is at 55 million, up from 54.3 last year. And that number I find is more useful to the board than your net financial asset measure of 30 million, because this tells you what is the real cash position that we have within our surpluses and reserves to deliver services. The asset retirement obligations, that's for example, the closure of your landfill costs that could occur 40 years out is not something you're going to be spending in current day. And your municipal finance authority debt attributed to the TNRD, not the member municipalities, is at 1.8 million. And again, you're only repaying $80,000 of that a year as opposed to the 1.8 million, which is why I separated that out for you. But at the end of the day, we can we see that we have a strong financial position this year, and we'll get into why that's important as we move through. The last item to highlight is your tangible capital assets. So this is all of your infrastructure this year. Your actual asset additions completed was $5.2 million in capital projects. Two of the most notable ones was the Monte Creek fire work, and then the solid waste management as well. So when we look at your revenues for the year, revenues came in at 45.1 million versus a budget of 44.5, so slightly favorable to budget. And down from last year at 48.9 million. But you can see that last year we had that nice big spike in your government transfers, and remembering the Growing Communities Fund was included in there, which is why we had such a high grant. This year we're back to more of a normal level. And the reason why you're favorable to budget is your investment income is budgeted very conservatively, as you can see on the far right, and it came in at approximately $2 million. And just this next slide just highlights, I know that last year, having sat through the budget presentation and when you set the tax rates, how important that is, because taxation does make up 2/3 of your overall revenues in a regular year. Now, we're going to go to our expense side. And this first slide that I have here is actually last year's expense numbers. It shows financial plan in red versus the 2023 results in blue and 2022 in white. And I want to contrast, if you look at how the graphs move, to how much tighter everything is to budget this year. I know that there was a lot of changes in the budgeting process, and you can see how close to budget everything was. And this was also, there was a lot of, items that were trimmed from the budget, and we can see the results that you were very close to your budget. You had total expenses of $44 million, with a favorable variance against the budget of 46.5 million and up from $40 million last year. And there really aren't very many variances to note, which I think is quite commendable on a $40+ million expense budget. It just goes to show the work that went in last year, and that presentation that you had, that you could see that the results came in very close to where they were supposed to be. And now this just breaks down the expenses by this functional areas that you have as well. Now, a new slide for those of you who've seen me present the statements before is for the surplus for the year. And what we've done on this slide is I wanted to break down how we get from your annual surplus and bring it back to the budget bylaw to explain what you're used to seeing when you're seeing your reports and approving the budget bylaw. So your annual surplus for the financial statements came in at $1 million. And this is versus a deficit planned of $2 million. Last year, you were had an $8.8 million surplus, but again, the Growing Communities Fund was the culprit there. Now, if we go and restate that surplus back to compensate for items that are in the financial plan that aren't on the statements as revenues and expenses, we can see that we have our capital projects came in at 5.2 million. We add back amortization, which is non-funded depreciation, and our surplus before transfers was at $359,000 versus a budgeted deficit of $22 million. So the plan was, when you approved the budget last year, that there was going to be significant capital projects that got delayed, as you can see in the numbers. And those amounts were going to be funded predominantly from your surpluses and your reserves. And so with this year, with you coming in at a surplus of $359,000, we go then and say, okay, we borrowed a little bit, we repaid a little bit, we transferred a smaller amount into reserves than we had planned to take a bunch out. And our surplus actually came in at $134,000 deficit if we compare it to the zero-based budget in your financial plan. So you can see how tight you were to the budget here. But if I take you back to the first slide where we talked about that $55 million in net financial assets that you have, that's your cash that you have, that seems like a large number, but that 15 million of capital that didn't happen this year is going to happen at some point, which is why it's important to know what you have in your reserves as well. And so before I open it up for questions on the statements, I wanted to walk us through the accumulated surplus because again, this is a number that for accountants, we should say, well, we've got $94 million in surplus. That's a lot, but I'm sitting here telling you, you only have $55 million in cash. So if we break down our accumulated surplus and we start by, let's take out the capital reserves. We have $26 million set aside for future capital projects. We can see that we had planned to spend 20 million of it this year, and we are going to be pulling that out in future years. So that would all but be drained if it all came from the reserves. So then we go to our accumulated surplus without capital reserves is 67 million left. Well, now let's pull out our operating reserves, and some of these are governed, as you know, the Community Works Fund. There's certain rules against that, COVID Safe Restart Funds, all those are there. We take that $15 million out, and we're left with an accumulated surplus of 52 million. So see how quickly that 92 million evaporates. And when we get to that 52 million, it's made up of our investment in capital assets, our investments in the Strata Corp, so this building that you have here, and other. As a reminder, invested intangible assets, that number is the equity you have in the community. It's all the infrastructure money you've spent, less what you owe on it. So it's not money that can be spent, it's just an accounting for, we have $39 million sitting there. The investment in the Strata Corp, exactly the same thing, and that's really the contingency fund for the building. The other is really what you have as your general funds, and so that $12 million represents what management has to spend to execute the budget before the property tax dollars come in. And so when we say that we have $92 million in surplus, you really have that $12.4 million to execute the budget on. And I think it's important to note that when you look at the amount of capital that's going to be coming and your overall operating budget, that isn't a very large number. And I know that there was a process last year to really try and make sure that we get the fat out of the budget, and that's happened now. And you'll want to be careful if you're going and pushing for additional, decreases in spending or trying to run the budget tighter because you need to have some money there in your surplus to make sure that if there is things like a project that's 3 years out, that all of a sudden we have a grant that's available now that we can save $3 million on by having money available. That's why you need to have some money set aside in there. It's not always what's in the surplus that you're going to be able to utilize. So I'm going to pause there because I've done a lot of talking so far and just open it up for any questions on what I've said about the numbers, or if there's anything that you read in the financial statements that you'd like to ask me about.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions at this stage? No one. Director Karpak, yes.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Piroddi, on the financial position, there's 2 columns marked as 2023. Was one supposed to be 2024?
Yes, the column
On the left?
would have been
Thank you.
2025.
Thank you for finding the obligatory deliberately inserted error. Congratulations. Anyone else have any questions at this stage? No? All right. Thank you very much. Continue.
Thank you. And so with that, we'll transition to the audit results. And again, the full report is in your package, but I just wanted to, highlight some of the few changes here. And the audit was completed in line with the expectations of a transitional audit year. Same wording that I had in there last year, but this was really the first full year that we had the team together, the rebuilt team in finance, and it went as expected. They're definitely smoother, a lot more of being able to respond quickly to our requests because there's that history building there. And so, I felt that from our end, the audit did run well, and there was no deviations from the planned approach. And so again, this means that the audit was pretty boring, which is a good thing, right? We want to, if we don't have to go and adjust our testing because the results aren't in line with what we expected, that means that we are finding that your controls are operating the way we want. The numbers are in line with what our expectations would be. And these years, it's getting harder and harder to create expectations on numbers because of all the inflationary pressures. I don't even want to talk about what 2025 is going to look like with tariffs going on and off and all of that. So it'll make our job a little tougher, but this year it was quite good. I'll jump to the last point and then come back up. We do specific testing towards people that can circumvent the control environment. So whether it's management or the board influencing management to do things. And as a result of our testings, we didn't identify any anomalies there. And then in terms of the audit, again, with the team really getting in and, having that stability in the finance team, what we found is that that next level of controls and policies were there, and it's continuing to evolve. So I wanted to let the board know that I'm quite pleased with what we're seeing from that direction. The one item that we did have in our management letter, and as you are all aware, it relates to, management is looking at converting to a new IT system, the ERP system that runs the finance and everything else. And, I've been in the loop and management's been talking to me throughout, so we're quite well aware of what's been happening. But I wanted to highlight to the board, and we've had this discussion with management, is that switching your ERP systems in the last 2 to 4 years has changed dramatically with the evolution of technology. And so if you're going through this change, you really want to make sure that you're looking at what you're at now and what you're going to need organizational wide over the next several years, not just what's going to fix today's problem. And I know that there's been a lot of things that have been dealt with in terms of strategy and looking at what's going to happen. And I really wanted to encourage management to continue down that journey as they're evaluating the proposals that are coming in and having that line of sight, because if you don't look out into the future with your systems, you're really missing an opportunity to capitalize on what's there. And it may result that management may come back to you and ask for changes or funding on certain things. And if that happens, I encourage you to listen, weigh the pros and cons, because again, if we get it right today, it sets us up for a much longer period as well in the future. And over and above that, that is all that I had on the audit itself. Is there any questions on how the audit went?
Any questions for Mr. Piroddi on the audit or anything else? No? No questions. All right, well, thank you very much.
Thank you. Always
Nice to get a
pleasure.
clean bill of health, always a pleasure, and enjoy the rest of your spring.
Thank you as well.
All right, our next delegation is appearing via Zoom. We have an invited presentation from Honor House Society Executive Director Craig Longstaff and Assistant to the Executive Director Kurt Appleby, who are going to be providing information about the Honor Ranch and the work they're involved with. And before we get to them, we are going to see a short video, so take it away. I think that's from the sublime to the ridiculous, illustrated right there. So thank you very much. I've got tears in my eyes because it is so beautiful up there and it is such a wonderful, wonderful spot. And just letting everyone know that there is a spot on Highway 1. You can see Highway 1 from the porch on the main building. And you might have noticed under the eave, there was a light. And if you know exactly where to look, carefully, of course, on Highway 1, just before you get to the Red Hills Rest Stop in Basque, you can look up and in the evening, you can see that single light blazing on the hillside. And I have done that before and slowed down and pulled off safely to look at that light. And I think it is a wonderful metaphor for the Honor Ranch. It is indeed a light in the darkness, a beacon in the darkness. And so on that note, I'm going to hand over to Craig and Kurt. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you. What do you need us for? That says it all right there. Craig, you want to go ahead and start here?
Yeah, I just start by maybe explaining what it is we do to those that don't know, just real quick. So Kurt and I are sitting here in New Westminster in Honor House right now. Honor House is a little bit like Ronald McDonald House for folks in uniform and their families. So basically, you know, to use an example, let's say there's a firefighter from Logan Lake and his little boy has cancer and they've got to come to Children's Hospital in Vancouver. You know, stay here for 5 weeks, 6 months, whatever that period might be. They all get to come and stay here as a family for completely free of charge. And as a charity, we take care of that for them. Honor House is a beautiful 11-bedroom period home here in New West, just near the Westies Armory behind City Hall. It's an absolutely gorgeous property. It's not an institution. It's all lovingly cared for by volunteers. Kurt and I are the only full-time employees. And after that, it's all young folks who are trying to get hired in police departments and fire departments, getting the volunteer time in, right through to members who've retired, military veterans, police officers, paramedics, firefighters, that kind of thing. And then the ranch in your area, that's a 160-acre property just outside Ashcroft, as Barb was saying, and that is specifically for mental health. Honor House is here for pretty much everything, including mental health, but the ranch is specific to that. So the ranch is somewhere where people can go and have a bit of respite, as you saw, take part in mental health programs, operational stress injury programs. It's not just a place to crash, a place to take a break, but it's a place to learn coping mechanisms and tools to go away, go home, and use those to support mental health. Yeah, it's a pretty special place, as Barb was saying, right there in the middle of nature, very, very quiet and peaceful. And I know some of you have definitely been there already on numerous occasions, but you know, I'd open an invitation to all of you. If you haven't had an opportunity to visit the ranch, or in fact, if you're down here in the Lower Mainland and you'd like to pop into Honor House and see what we're doing here, you're very, very welcome to come along and check it out. To give you a bit of an update about the ranch, we have more programs on at the property than we've ever had before this year, and that's always been our goal, is to increase the amount of people up there that we're helping out. Everything from police, fire, paramedics, BC Wildfire. We met with BC Wildfire executives yesterday. I'm sure you're well aware, more than aware, that they've had a rough couple of years and lost some members and had a very difficult and stressful time. So BC Wildfire are booking two week-long programs up there for their members that have been struggling with their mental health. We've had everything from PADS. We support other charities, so we've had PAD service dogs up there last year. They booked another program again this year for military veterans and RCMP members. We had 14 dogs up there. All service dogs and very, very well behaved dogs, posing for a photograph there, looking down at the spot that Barb was just referencing on Highway 1, all paying attention to the camera. We've made some pretty big differences in some people's lives, and we'd love to share that with you as well, and just what an impact that community of Ashcroft is having on so many different people throughout the province and beyond. We're trying to get more programs off the ground there. I did want to take this opportunity. I think I have actually met a couple of folks that are there today. I may have had a conversation with one of you, so I do apologize if I brought this up before. But although a lot of the programs at the ranch are third-party programs, we would like to develop some of our own with a bit of help. I think there's some members there from Kamloops. Kamloops is the home of the International Fly Fishing Championships, I believe. And you look across the border into the States, and there must be 100 fly fishing programs for veterans. In Canada, not so much. We've had some grants from Cabela's and Bass Pro Shops. Merit Legion's donated to us for a fly fishing program. And we'd love to see one of those up at the ranch for our folks in uniform. Just learning a new skill. If any of you are fly fishermen or fisherwomen, like you'll see that, tying flies is very therapeutic as well. So if there's anybody there that would like to help with something like that, as an example, especially the folks in Kamloops, if there's any kind of connections you can make for us, we're just set up and ready to go with plenty of people trying to check into the ranch and use it for that purpose. That's just one example of a very kind of simple therapeutic program. Most of the programs that take place up there are a little bit more kind of high tech in that, there's clinicians, psychotherapists. We just developed one of the older cabins into a one-on-one kind of suite for counseling. We see people going up with the BC Wildfire, for example, did hot and cold treatment with a mobile wood sauna and freezing like plunge pool, and all sorts of therapy like yoga and meditation and breathing exercises, that kind of thing. So there's a lot going on up there. And Kurt, I'm just going to hand over to you because I know we were at the UBCM not too long ago. I'm chatting to various local city councillors and mayors about some other things that I'll let Kurt talk about.
Yeah, really quickly. Thanks, Greg. We're looking to expand our partnerships with, electoral and municipal partners here and sponsoring your members, say a volunteer firefighter, or the fire department has 20 members. If you wanted to support their membership to Honor House Society at $20 a year, it's $400. It's not a lot when you consider it an insurance program, because if any of your members or their families especially get hurt in the line of duty, or if they get sick with anything, you're ensuring that they've got a place to go. We don't receive any federal or provincial funding from government, so we're really looking to partner with those municipalities to sponsor your members. We've got people staying at our house right now that are living in your areas. Multiple of them reside in the TRD right now. We're at a full house, as Craig mentioned, 11 bedrooms, each with their own ensuite bathroom and one kitchen. It's about a double-sized kitchen. So if you're looking to support your members, do it through membership through Honor House Society, and it's just going to ensure that they've always got a place to go when they're sick. And as I mentioned, it's the families that are important too, the kids, the spouses, the members themselves. We're out here, we've just hit 16,500 night stays in our 15 years, and you add that up to Vancouver hotel rooms, and that's millions and millions of dollars. So when it's one organ transplant, I can tell you right now, we have somebody here in the TNRD who lives in the TNRD region. They're here for cancer treatment and transplant treatment all at the same time. They're going to be here for 6 months, and that would cost them tens of thousands of dollars. They're a military veteran. That pension does not go that far. So to have them stay here, they're very thankful and they're very supportive. And to get the support from their municipality and electoral areas would go a long way. I think that's it for me, Craig. I think that's probably it for you. If anybody's got any questions, we're more than happy to answer.
Yeah, and please do. And again, I'll open that invitation to any of you. If you want to visit us, please let us know. We would absolutely love to show you around both properties.
Thank you. Are you still planning on moving ahead with the building of 10 more cabins?
I think that's on hold right now, Bob. We're just kind of securing the current infrastructure at the moment. We're certainly filling the location with guests. Almost every single program that takes place there has every cabin full. I think that's going to be down the road a little bit. But that day is definitely going to come eventually, probably not too far away. We are definitely packing them in and trying to help as many people as we possibly can, obviously. Yeah. What we would really like is to some, big industry individual, with maybe a cabin building business that would be able to get involved and help out in that way. I'm sitting in a house here that, as Kurt said, 11-bedroom house that every single fixture, fitting, carpet, window, and everything was all donated. Whether that was by unions with our fire escape, bedding, everything, everything's donated. We had a local Vancouver company just come along and donate $130,000 worth of painting. They painted the whole house inside and out. And that's how we survive. We reach out to so many different places and ask. So yeah, the cabins, I would hope, would be a similar situation.
Thank you. I have Director Middleton. Does anyone else have questions or comments? All right, Director Middleton.
Thank you. And I'm probably asking a few questions that if I did enough research, I might be able to find the answers. But is there wait times for people to get into your programs and to be a resident or an occupier of your bedroom spaces? Shall we say, is this considered to be more like a day program where someone would arrive and participate in programs? I just look unclear as to, somebody requiring this help that you have to offer. Can they get it immediately, or is there a backup for participants?
No, at the moment, I can tell you that we have 13 programs already booked. Our kind of season is just starting. I mean, Ashcroft, the snow is almost gone. People driving up from the lower mainland, it's not too difficult right now, obviously. So the occupancy there, we want to see back to back to back programs. So it's full week after week after week. Right now, there's 13, which is more than we've ever had. And again, we met with BC Wildfire yesterday to put on another program with them. So I fully expect it within, I would say, if I'm guessing, just looking at what things have happened so far, if I had to say maybe 2 years' time, maybe a year and a half, I would imagine that there is, yes, going to be a wait list. As far as kind of showing up on the day, they definitely need to book in advance with having bookings there already, right? So you can't just kind of show up at the ranch and take part in a program that very day. You'd need to get in touch with us to book it. It's a very simple process, with especially military veterans, not big fans of red tape. So we keep the documentation and paperwork down to a minimum, and we kind of guide them through that process as well. So the actual use of the ranch, one person kind of generally controls that for the group. Usually an executive member of that group will control it. We kind of guide them through that process. It's actually pretty simple.
So the model then more is designed for groups to come in
Yeah.
in an organized fashion, pre-booked and whatnot. So this is not something that an individual who's struggling, who is maybe not a member of a group or whatnot. This isn't this is not an in-house sort of treatment program or anything like that offered to individuals. It's more designed for group.
Yeah, exactly.
Group programming.
Yeah, spot on. Yeah, so it's third-party groups, like again, BC Wildfire, Fire Chiefs Association, Police Chiefs Association. We even have the RCMP dive team. They obviously the recovery team, the awful things that they have to deal with. They book it. Take that time, they bring in their own clinicians, they bring in their own support staff, and they run their own program. All they have to do is provide us with a clearly defined and laid out program of events while they're using the ranch, and show us that, and then we approve that and give them a thumbs up. And that's pretty much it. I see your point about individuals, because one of the popular misconceptions has been, and I totally understand why, because people phone us and say, hey, I need a break. I need to get away from everything. Can I go to the ranch? Well, that's not what it is. It's not a place for homeless folks to kind of go crash. It's not just a one-day thing. It's a very kind of controlled, clearly defined program that they would be attending. I think in the future, I mentioned the fly fishing is a good example. I think in the future it would be nice to try and get some funding so that we can run some multi-organizational programs. you know, where it would be a retired RCMP member and a veteran and a firefighter all in the same place, because they obviously have that very much shared background of experience. And there's some peer support and camaraderie there. So I think, yeah, in the future it could be multi-organizational, but right now it's definitely, you know, a third party.
Thank you.
Thank you, Craig. Does anyone else have any questions, comments? Director Sarai.
Yeah, I wasn't sure that I was going to get a reply this quick, but when you mentioned the fly fishing, I reached out to a very well-known fly tying and fly fisherman in Kamloops, and the Kamloops Fly Fishermen's Club is actually getting together to hold some schools to teach fly tying and fishing, and I will send you those links and get you guys hooked up together.
That'd be brilliant. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank you very much. Any other questions or comments? All right. Well, thank you, Craig. Thank you, Kurt. Always nice to see the Honor Ranch truck around town. Usually I think it's Super Dave in the driver's seat, but look forward to getting up there again sometime this summer.
Fantastic.
soon
Thanks,
then,
Bob.
Mayor.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right, we move on to item 8.3. We have building infraction, construction without permits, BP 14906 and 17865 in electoral area O. We have an opportunity for the owner to make representation to the board. Is there anyone here to speak to this? No, no one here to speak to this item. Moving along to 8.4, building infraction, construction without building permit BP 018030 in electoral area N. I have an indication that Sarah Pearson is going to be addressing
all the time, and we move ahead and we put the stop worker orders and everything on. Do we ever get an update on ones we've done in the past? I see a lot of them come through, but I never really see, do they comply? Do they not? Like, do we ever get a report saying you did 20 of these in 2024 and 15 people complied? Just, is a report necessary? I just would like to know if these people ever actually come to the table.
Through the chair, so no, we haven't been doing reporting like that. It sometimes takes 15, 20 years before they come back. Because the notice gets put on, that's what reduces our liability. And then if that owner hangs on to it and never sells it, the notice doesn't really do anything. But when they come in to sell or go to sell, that's when it comes up. So during the COVID 2020, 2021 real estate boom, I'll call it, there were quite a few people who came out of the woodwork with notices from the 1990s still asking how they can come into compliance at that point. So eventually it catches up to people, but it'll be hard to track on a year-to-year basis.
Thank you. Anyone else have any questions regarding this item? All right, on the motion, all those in favor? Is anyone opposed? Director Haughton?
Yes.
Thank.
Just trying to figure out how to work this. Thank you.
Okay. I thought maybe being where you are, someone was asking you, when were you born? Because that is a question you get asked a lot in that place.
That happened about 3 minutes ago.
Okay. All right, so that motion is passed. Thank you very much. We move on to 9.2, building infraction electoral area N. We have a staff recommendation. Director Thorpe, thank you. Seconded by Director Middleton, thank you. Is there any discussion on this item? Director Sal.
Thank you, Chair, through to staff. Was there, so the Ms. Pearson wanted to be here online. Did she have any message in that, you know, she couldn't make it, but did she have a message for us?
I did not receive any message from her, just that she was unable to attend due to an emergency.
Any questions or comments on this item? All right, on the motion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That is carried. Thank you. Item 10.1, zoning amendment bylaw 2868 in electoral area J. Director Grenier.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to declare a conflict. I have a civil matter with one of the proponents. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Ranta moves that, seconded by Director Blackwell. Is there any discussion on this recommendation? No discussion, questions, comments on the motion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That is carried. We move on to 10.2, zoning amendment bylaw number 2874, electoral area I. We do have two recommendations. Director Thorpe, seconded by Director Graham. Thank you. Any discussion on recommendation number 1, which is taking it to read a first and second time and be taken to a public hearing? Any questions for staff? On the motion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That is carried. And we have Director Ranta, thank you. Director Thorpe seconds that. Any discussion on recommendation number 2? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That is carried. Item 10.3, 2025-2029 5-year financial plan report and bylaw number 2870. CFO Fox has a presentation for us.
Thank you, Chair, through to the board. So I wanted to start today just to give you a little bit of a summary and an opening. For me, and I'm sure for you, the budgets are more than just numbers on the page. They're a reflection of our priorities, our responsibilities, and ultimately the future that we're shaping for the communities. As we discuss the 5-year plan today, I want to start by acknowledging the balance that we try to strike when trying to ensure residents receive the services that they contribute towards a quality of life, while also being mindful of affordability and financial sustainability. It's really always a challenge to try and make sure that the services we bring are affordable and what our constituents want. Each electoral area and municipality has unique needs, and for a regional district, that often makes budgeting challenging and unique. One reality kind of remains constant, though: costs are rising, inflation, market fluctuations, the service demands, and they don't pause simply because we wish they would. If we do not account for these realities in our financial planning, we risk eroding the very services the communities rely on. And it's always a good reminder for me, being a resident, knowing residents within our communities, that we're doing our due diligence every year to bring sustainable services forward, knowing that costs are increasing, and trying to take seriously that challenge on of how to continually bring a budget forward that is reasonable and that you can stand behind. A key concern I want to highlight is our reliance sometimes on reserves to offset taxation. While reserves serve as an important purpose, using them to subsidize ongoing costs in the short-term solution does create a long-term risk. This approach is not sustainable, and when we look at opportunities in the future, we certainly don't want to jeopardize our stability of our services and our ability to respond to the future challenges that we have by utilizing reserves. Staff start working on the budget in September here at the regional district. I learned recently that not all the regional districts do start that early. However, I think it's a real benefit to us and the conversation that we have. By bringing a real conversation to the board in November with the workshop, this allows us to kind of bring our department heads to you, and we give a SWOT presentation, which just is a strength and weaknesses type of a presentation that allows us to give you a consistent format for us to bring forward our successes, some of our challenges, and some of the issues that we might face, and give you a heads up as we're heading into the budget. This seems to be very well received. This is also an opportunity for the board members to request some changes or additions to be considered. It's important to note, because when we come to you in March, at this time, there's very little time from the time you approve a budget to the due date of March 31st. So knowing that we've done a lot of upfront work prior to this, I think is valuable. Director of Operations and myself, so Jamie and myself, we do make time to meet, and the CAO also, Scott comes as well. And we take time to meet with every director that would like to meet with us to go over their list of services. Typically that is the electoral areas, as they have a lot of specific services to them. This gives us an opportunity to set a base budget that has considerations in it if there are changes in service levels that are requested. This also gives us a great base to bring forward a realistic plan and a provisional budget for approval in December. So there are areas that just use the next year of their 5-year financial plan and say in December, this is our provisional budget and we move forward. That isn't something we do here. I actually am really proud of the process that we follow by building from September to December. We actually have changes and implemented realistic numbers into our next year for you guys to take into consideration. When we receive the new assessment roll, so the completed assessment roll from BC Assessment is not until December. It's not lined up very well for having to have a provisional budget approved in December. And then we don't actually receive the revised roll from BC Assessment till the end of March. So I haven't got it yet. And I'm bringing you a budget to tell you about the tax implications, and we don't know the final assessment rolls. I'm pretty confident that the completed roll that they give us has a lot of the things taken into consideration, but you know, there's an appeals board and those changes or some of the growth might not be in there. Today, I'm going to start by talking with you on the taxation and taxation impacts. I really separated up the budget for different viewers' requests or needs. So I've created a summary that you guys get. There's also a departmental summary that has all the list of services. So if you wanted to see a line by line expense and revenue, we give you that. If you only want to see the summary, you just need to go to the summary statement. We give you the capital plan with all the reserve balances at your fingertips to look through. We also give you the utilities plan, the parcel tax implications, and the utility fees. When I come here today, knowing that I've already talked to you guys, the board twice, I take a pause because my husband has listened to me present. And when I say you guys, he gives me heck every time. And I catch myself saying that. So my apologies. I'm going to try to catch myself and say, you, the board. So I heard his voice in my head. He'll be happy to know that. So I'm going to take the time to go through the tax implications, but I really don't have in 30 minutes to bring you the budget presentation at this time. I have to take into account that there could be people tuning in to listen to this that don't know or have not heard the presentation. So I have to do my due diligence, but I know there will be some redundancy in the information you've heard. I'll try to say it in a different way, maybe a different tone, keep you awake, but we'll get through it, and hopefully I can skim through it in a way that gives you the sense that you have enough information to stand behind the budget that we're putting in front of you. The utility fund did not change significantly since the provisional, slight adjustment for year-end results, and we'll touch on that plan. The board did approve a capital plan in December to help support staff in what we needed to do early on in the year. But of course, year-end results affect the carry forward projects from 2024, so numbers do shift there. And as we learn different items about different issues about capital plans and grant funding, we do shift the capital projects slightly. So you will see that on there. For me to cover every capital item, I think there was 176, something like that, capital projects on the list, and then go through this entire budget with you, which I know is a gauntlet to get through. It's a little bit hard, but please, if there's questions, hopefully it was great material to read through and you got the bits and pieces out of it that you needed to make you feel confident. Today's conversation is really about making informed, responsible choices that we've discussed quite in depth to this point, and to deliver essential services today while ensuring future generations are not left with financial burdens. So let's dive into the numbers and we'll explore how we can align the financial plan with the long-term needs. So I will pop back there. We do, just as a reminder, as I'm going through here and you have questions, certainly as I'm going through, if you want to bring up questions at that time, and if it's something I might get to further down the road, we might just add you to the parking lot of questions. So just know that you can bring up your question when you need. I'll try to watch for that. This here is timely, and I don't really stop and talk to this often, but I want to just give you a little tidbit on this. This is something that Scott and Colton worked on. We put this up front of our information with the federal election coming up. I have found I've shared this personally, and it's got really great reviews for people that don't work with different levels of government, and for the information that's out there, what government offers what services. So this has been really useful, and I just wanted to throw that out there. This is something that I've actually, to be honest, when I talk about budgets and people usually glaze over or they hear a hum in their ears, but this one here, they've actually taken interest in. I'm not going to go in depth into this because this is a slide you guys have seen a number of times. I'll just touch on the new changes since the provisional. And of course, Austin and I have printed out a list and compared every service from what we did provisionally to the final budget. So I do have that information, but of course I would never take you through that exercise. What I want to do though is just summarize the bigger portions of changes. So one of the great wins I think that the board got behind and supported was the Parks Community Assistance Reserve reduction. So we had a reserve that was sitting there that was collected for the Community Assistance Reserve under Parks, and the board has supported almost $1 million worth of money going back to those electoral areas. So since provisional, over the 3 years, we've divided that up, and each electoral area is getting back their portion. So I think that was a great win for this year for helping to reduce that tax impact. And that is one where we're using reserves that doesn't have that long-term impact that I worry about, because the service isn't there. We're not going to continue billing for that service. That there is, I think, one that we can feel pretty good about. The surplus adjustments that happen for year end, of course, we do our best to do projections for surplus, but there are changes to that. So we'd have to make adjustments where we see that we didn't hit the mark on those ones. We did, in that case, interest revenue, we kept, and we did bring that to the board as a request to keep interest revenue in solid waste. Often we're asked what happens, we did get extra interest revenue this year, but interest revenue itself is actually transferred directly to the reserve it comes from. So we don't typically keep those in the operating budgets. But the solid waste budget is one where we've had definite challenges with cost increases, contract increases, and reduction of revenue that is kind of double-edged sword on us to meet the level of service that we want and not have large tax increases. So we are using the interest revenue that we kept in there to make sure we get the surplus that we projected. And then we're also bringing in reserves to offset that budget. Solid waste, we did, after provisional, come up with another $100,000 worth of savings, however. So we dove in and did a little bit more digging there to come up with that. Reduction in reserve transfer to solid waste. We increased in recycling revenue. So we redid the projection on that. We were able to get a little bit extra revenue projection there. We transferred to reserve. We did increase the transfer to the reserve to the library. Since we've changed the way that we have capital and operating separately, library is a little bit of a unique beast because we actually capitalize books, but their digital content we don't capitalize. We have to make sure, sometimes we try to sacrifice the tax increase by reducing the transfer to reserve. We can't do that in the library. We have almost $800,000 worth of books across our libraries that we need to invest in every year. And if we reduce that transfer to reserve, we don't have enough money to pay for our library books. Plus, it's one of the biggest areas we have our facilities. We have a ton of facilities and we have to make sure that there's enough money in the reserve to deal with any emergent situations in infrastructure. And I'd say that's where we're at with library. We're at enough money in the reserve to deal with emergent, not to deal with the amount of capital infrastructure that we have in there, which is something that I'm targeting to speak with you about, getting our reserve transfers up to where they should be over the next year. So it's not a discussion that I will get into today. We also had the board approve the 2 positions to support the tiny library in Aberdeen. And that came after the provisional, and that is included in the numbers. I'm pretty, I feel pretty good about where we've brought this to at the 5.9%. We were able to reduce, I think the previous 2 years when I brought you back the final budget, it was higher than we did provisionally. So I feel pretty good that we were able to bring this back to you lower than we did provisionally. And we've done a lot of work with the board and with staff to get you there. You can see here the municipal breakdown, electoral area breakdown, and then the specified area breakdown. To the far right are the percentages that the taxation requisition make up. I know that Jamie's definitely not a fan of me using the global tax rate. I'll point that out. The 5.9% is a little bit misleading. We use it because people can take that number in better. Municipally, that makes sense because they have really one service. With the number of services that we have, if you really want to see the percent impact to that service in that area, you need to go to the tax impact document because that will tell you the percent changes by service. Again, just it's about a $1.6 million increase over the previous year. A large part of that was already negotiated wage increases. So there's really only $400,000 to $500,000 increase in taxation that was added on. We've done a lot of work to incorporate the changes that we needed within the budget we had. This is a neat look, I think, to give to you guys. So when I polled the other regional districts, I wanted to see where they were ending up. Now, to be fair, the ones that say first draft, that's before they've gone back to work on it. So they might have come down or changed from those. I want to point out, and I'm going to show you a graph that makes this a little bit easier to look at. If we didn't use the reserves that we're using in the solid waste budget and the building services budget, we would be at a 12.8% increase. What I really want, and this conversation came up today about level of services earlier in the day. What the board has to understand, and I think what constituents have to realize is if they're happy with the services that they're receiving, to bring them the quality of life that they want. Costs increase every year. That is the way things are. That is not the board, that is not us as a local government trying to make it hard. That is us bringing you a realistic budget to pay for services. If we don't bring and include inflationary increases, cost increases, we then end up trying to do more and more with less. And that doesn't put us in a good situation. I want to point out that the CSRD, 0.95%. The way they got to that number is they actually suspended two services. One that was $426,000 and one that was $759,000, or they were at 6.7%. So I would say when we are working on these things in the future, and if you're concerned about the tax increases that you're seeing year over year, you have to really look and decide if that's the level of service that you want, if you can reduce that level of service, or if you don't want that service. Those are the things that are going to become more challenging for us, because we're really, as Mario presented to you, and I'm proud of this, but it actually worries me. We have dove into surplus reductions, and we have made a lot of cuts. And I think when I brought that conversation to you guys before, I said, we're getting to the point, the first year I was very conservative, don't want to change too much, I didn't know about. The next year, you know, we cut. This year we cut again. We had a lot of negatives in reductions. We're getting very close to the bone. And I don't want to do death by 1,000 cuts. I don't want us to continue to try and squeeze, and we do a disservice to ourselves. So I think it's really great what we've been able to accomplish. We start the conversations early, but I just want to caution that we continue to increase taxation year over year. And it is really hard, even though we are trying as a staff, to not have that increase year over year if we continue to do the same services with what we have. One of the things we will be able to consider, though, is the ERP system. Once we get that, I think that will help change the face of the organization, and we might be able to do more with less. That's my hope, is that it will help us do things more effectively and efficiently, and we can maybe find some of those things. That's one of my big desires, to kind of move in that direction. This is the chart that makes that a little bit easier to look at. So you can see we're at the low end with the TNRD. Within the backup documentation for the budget, you have the municipal taxation requisitions, and it shows the changes between each year. Lytton always jumps out over the last few years because, of course, any assessment values that they have a low assessment, and any assessment value increase that happens over the year makes that percentage look quite large. But they are dealing with one of the smaller numbers. Also important to remember that your tax requisition, all the regional costs that you split up between all of you, the way that's done is that we take all the assessment values and add them all together. And then whatever your portion of assessment is, that makes up your portion of the regional costs. So assessment values are important if yours are shifting largely, which is what we did see with the pipeline last year. I think it was Area B that had a big shift. They took on more of the regional costs, but they also had a large industrial increase. They pay 3.4 times more taxation than a resident, and overall residential taxation went down. But to explain that and make that make sense can be a bit challenging. So that's where I'm going to spend most of what we talk about today, and then I'll just skim over the rest of the information for you. We have the electoral area requisitions. You can see in 3 areas, E, I, and M. The overall tax requisition is lower, and a majority of that is because of that community assistance reserve return to those services. I wanted to just give you a quick snippet of and a look. We don't typically spend a lot of time talking about the services, So I just thought I would bring that up a little bit today. We have services like the Film Commission, Fraser Basin. We have regional parks. We have building standards, Crime Stoppers, dangerous dogs, E911, emergency preparedness, critical street lighting, community parks, mosquito control. Have you ever seen this number of businesses under one umbrella, and we have to come up with cost strategies and business plans for every one of these? It's actually, it's exciting, and at the same time, it can be very overwhelming when you're first coming in. We have given you so much information in the budget package that I think would be interesting as a resident if you were looking through. But one of the interesting ones we do is the cost per 1,000. And there's also within the package a cost per 100,000. So it just breaks down the total requisition amount into a cost per 1,000. And then it shows you the change into your total requisition. We also this year, we get a lot of comments of, oh, you're using $680,000 as the average residential rate for a home or home value. I think it was Director Lepso, I think, one year challenged me on, is that really the average? And we use Kamloops because it was just easier. With the systems that we have now, and with Austin here helping me out, we actually calculated the average residential home value per area, which I thought was an interesting way to do it, because of course, when we use 680 and then you look at Clinton, which is 223,000. So we've broken that down a little bit differently for you. So you can actually say, look, my weekly amount owing for Kamloops is $3.12. The actual increase, the taxes owing, $162.28 per year. So I think that goes a long way in helping support the directors when they're trying to communicate this information to residents and let them know what the impact is that they're paying and what the increase is. So as a resident, how can your tax rates go down? And I did kind of talk about that at the beginning. So currently we use the BC completed rule. The total assessment values are used to calculate the regional costs allocated to each municipality and electoral area. This can change your allocation. Each area assessments are made up of different classes. So that's important to remember. Once your assessment is there, there is 7 or 8 different classes, and where those assessment values lie based on the converted assessment value, you will pay your share of those taxes. Also assessment growth. So if you think in your area there was 100 residents, now there's 105, and the taxes haven't changed, you'll pay less because more people are paying that burden of taxation. There is assessment value change information built throughout this document that you should be able to look at and see. So you will be able to see the revised converted assessment that was used for 2024. And when we first did your provisional budget, there's a completed converted assessment. So you can see the assessment changes. And I think the important thing to note over on the right is if you look at 2024, Kamloops paid 63.1% of the regional costs for the TNRD. In 2025, Kamloops paid 62.7% of those regional costs. That's always an interesting one. So that means another area grew proportionately to take on more of the assessment than Kamloops did, which brought that down. They pay a large portion of those regional costs. So if yours actually went up, you're gonna see an increase in those regional costs before anything changes with the budget. You'd see a change in your tax bill. And that's same for electoral areas. So we've shown the shift between the 2 years. So if I looked at area A, other than a very tiny 0.38% change down, but if you jump to area M, it's actually proportionally gone down by 2.7%. Your taxation requisition will look like this. This is what, when I say we meet with each of the directors, this is what we go through, and this is what I call the menu of services that you are a part of. This will change, this is your cost per 100,000, and it shows the requisition from 25 to 24. There's your same for the electoral area A. Okay, I'm gonna jump to here. We have done with communications over the last 2 years now, we did infographics. These have actually been really widely received. We won an award for the infographics on here. Not that other regional districts aren't doing something similar. Lots of them have great ideas. This one just seemed to gain some attention and momentum, so we've got recognized for that. It's really useful. We use this with our frontline staff, share this with people all the time, and hopefully when you get into your budget packages, this is a document I think most people or most directors will like, because it's the way of communicating these numbers in a really broken down visual fashion to the constituents. The average home calculation is also included, so we've broken it down. I just show you here when I talk about the different classes. You can just see here, you have a residential, utilities, supportive housing, all the way down to farm class. Your assessment for each area will be broken down in a similar fashion. We use those numbers to generate the tax amount owing per average home, and then calculate out how much that's going to cost on average. You will see the same thing for electoral area A, and this is their class breakdown. It really just gives you a visual of the calculation of the taxes is a little bit complex. It is actually a hard thing to explain sometimes to get people to understand all the complexities of the assessment changes to the budget changes. I tried to do that in the first year that I did budget presentation and really break that down. I think we're to a point that everybody kind of is used to seeing the information that I provide. I would just expect that if you guys need help through this or to explain this in any way, reach out to Austin or myself, and we will help you one-on-one and take you through that if you need. We do get comments sometimes that we don't focus on the 5-year. You can see that some people might be straining to pay attention already. And if I go through 4 more years of information, this could be challenging. But I want to put this up to show you the 5-year tax rate projection on the global tax rate increase. Please keep in mind that we cannot budget for surplus. So in 2026, right now, there's no surplus budgeted in there, knowing that when I first started, we had $8 million of surplus, and that's on average coming in between $4 and $5 million. We know we're going to have surplus, and it will help those budget areas. But there are some things right now that are bumping those up. Number one, in development services, we have reducing revenues, which is creating a challenge for us. And we don't have in building standards, we have reserves, but in development services themselves, we do not have reserves to draw down the cost increases there. In solid waste and recycling, we've known, and the board has supported increases overall, and we do have reserves coming in over the 5-year plan in building standards and in solid waste over the 5 years, kind of stepping down each year so that at the end of those 5 years, all of a sudden there isn't this big jump in taxation. We have the new ERP system coming in to the administration, the regional costs. So that will, once that's up and running, that will have an impact, and there will be an increase in general government services to absorb the increase in that ERP system. Those are the major components of those increases. I'm not overly concerned. It's going to take a year to kind of write the library system and make sure that reserve is on track. We're also going to have a little bit of challenge over the next year when I bring back, we've had this reserve policy that you've adopted that says we have certain targets we have to meet, and I've been working on some of that work. We are going to be challenged with some decisions to try and meet the targets that are in there because we're not meeting those targets right now. And you'll see that when we do that work. The bylaw itself breaks this down in a way that you can see we have general operating services budget, we have utilities services fund, we have general services capital, and we have utility services capital. The total in 2024 was 85.9 million. In 2025, it's 91.1 million. You can dive into these budgets. You can see where all those increases are, and we've outlined them in the report. The revenues and the expenditures match, and this is where Mario is talking about, we have the zero-based budgeting. They don't take into account reserve transfers, debt payments, because we do a cash-based budgeting. Operating plan revenues are there for you to see. They're broken down by category, so you can see that. Also, the expenditures are there broken down by category. The 5 years, it's a lot of data. It's a lot of numbers to intake. What I would say is my best piece of advice is to go into the departmental list of services and look at each service. That would be more meaningful. If you look at the cemetery and you understand the cemetery in your area and you can see the revenue and expenses, that makes much more sense to an individual director than trying to look at the overall number for the whole organization. But it's in there. That is what the bylaw needs to be approved. And it is also interesting if you want to know how much we spend on supplies as the entire TNRD. How much do we spend on wages as the entire TNRD? But meaningful decision-making doesn't happen there. It happens at the service level. That is this. There's pages of services for you to sift through in your spare time. And we have some really diligent people that are going through this line by line and sending questions our way. I would expect that. So certainly if you see questions on here, we give you line by line detail. We can point you in the right direction because I don't expect, we live and breathe this. I know where it is almost by memory, maybe even in my dreams. And I don't expect you to know this. Oh, I'm going to jump back because this is utility. So I want you to also note that there is the utility fund. It is broken down by revenues, again, by revenues and expenses by category. But the more meaningful information is getting into the service itself. If you're passionate about Pritchard, you live in that area and you have to answer to residents about Pritchard, there's details in there about Pritchard. The utility fee increase, just for you to note that you can go back in there and look at that. A lot of work has been done with that in Utilities Committee. And although these are shocking, it makes me proud that we've come this far with utilities. We have briefly talked about utilities in a previous meeting today, and we talked about utility fund expenditures running through the operating fund and how you can do that. You should not do that. Utilities are generated by user fees. Operating fund, general fund is by taxation. This is important to note. When I first came in, I could see that we were running some of our utilities costs through the electoral area administration budget, which is fine. There was revenues there to offset the expenditures and they were flowing them through there. Because if you think you have different utilities, all the costs within those utilities have to be charged there. But our staff and our equipment sometimes aren't to Savinaw and Pritchard. They're shared amongst all of them. So we have an administration budget, and then at the end of the year, we make sure all that budget gets charged out to the different utilities. We have now moved that off the EA budget and created that just to make that very clear that we're not subsidizing utilities through operations because legislative, you're not allowed. And it wasn't very clear. We were muddying the waters. One thing that we have kept there is that there are wages for senior level utilities staff running through EA admin for a very minimal amount of money. When we were fixing that, we did debate whether we should move all of those costs off there and put them all in the utilities fund. And when I polled the different regional districts for reasonability, they all said they don't do that. They said that there is a certain level of support and work that is done at an administrative level to support that work. So if you imagine there were no utility services, we're still expected to offer utilities. Who does the research? Who looks at the plans? Who pulls that information together? So they all felt reasonably that that was there. I think municipal affairs would agree that if 10 people are doing it and they find it reasonable, it's probably a reasonable practice. We haven't suggested changing that and we have left it now where it is. It will be up to the board at some point if they want to consider a different allocation. But I wanted to explain that because that's come up a couple times. I am not going to go in depth into here, but I want to open it up. The provisional plan presented $26 million worth of capital. We're at 24.9. $12 million of that is from carry forward projects that were not complete in 2024. 12.7 million of that is new projects. There is a listing. We've done this a couple ways because we did actually get requested by electoral areas to provide this. So in that capital plan document, there is actually a listing of capital projects by electoral area. You might find that useful. It also breaks down the reserves that support those. So there was a question about what reserves belong to the electoral areas, and you can easily see your projects in there with the reserve funding by area. Just wanted to point that it's out in your package. The difference there, we did do some shifts and additions. Jamie talked today about doing some additional projects in utilities that weren't there before. There were some removed that didn't need to be carried forward, and we were able to find reductions there. I want to stop here at this point because I do go into a certain level of project detail that I'm not sure is required. I want to see if the board would like to dive into further project detail in capital, or if they're satisfied with this level and that they've gone through the report and feel comfortable with what we've put forward. Are there any questions on the information I presented to this point or on the capital in particular?
Director Middleton and Director Goetz. Oh, Director Goetz.
Thank you. This is just for my own personal situation. Our CMP, last year in Merritt, we had 6,500 calls for service. 1,800 of them were in the TNRD. But there's no sharing of the cost. That's 12% of our callouts. The TNRD tax bill has a line for fire protection. And it also has a line for police services. There's a number after it. So where does that money go? And the reason I'm asking is because we've been going over this quite extensively, and we will be making this information known to you. But as far as police costs coverage, we're going to have to start asking TNRD to be part of it, considering 12% of our calls are in the TNRD. So the bills I can produce for you from people who have a police line cost, it was their open house and they brought them in. So I'm not sure if you're aware that there is a police deduction on these bills and where that money actually goes.
I'll take the first crack at that question through the chair. So I think what you're referring to is the actual property owner's tax notice that has a police line on it. So that police line is collected on rural property taxes through the province. So it's not a TNRD tax. So we don't collect that tax, but the province collects that tax to fund rural policing. So that doesn't flow through this budget, and that's why you're not seeing any RCMP costing in any TNRD budget.
So if it's being collected through rural, how do we get our hands on the 12% that we're owed? Because we certainly don't get anything.
So the province collects that funding. So I don't I can't answer what the province does with that money, but we don't determine that rate. It's determined by the province because the province collects rural taxation. They create the tax notice and give the TNRD the portion that gets approved for this budget. We don't create the tax notice.
So I'll be honest, we'll be sending that information into you because we need some answers on that. Some people want some answers on that. I got to be honest. So thank you.
Director Middleton.
Thank you. Just a quick one. If we go back to the tax rec departmental 5-year, and we see just the numbers of what we're projecting out for the next 5 years, 13% in 2026. Is that at this stage of the game what we are anticipating our tax increase is going to be next year? That's a huge number compared to all the rest of them. So is there a quick answer on that one?
Thank you, Chair, through to the board. So this is where I said it does have a little shock value there. What I would say is, number one, when I first came in here, the TNRD board did not really give attention to the 5-year plan. And when this was brought forward pre my time, that number was closer to 30%. Because as soon as the surplus goes away, it was almost $8 million of surplus that disappeared in the next year. The budgets all went up and they didn't talk about it. We've actually done a lot of work to make that a more reasonable number. But after the provisional budget, we didn't play too much more with moving reserves and doing that. We've kind of left that as it is. Remember that on average, we are bringing in $4 to $5 million worth of surplus, or bringing in. We have about $4 to $5 million worth of surplus that will reduce that number. So I'm not worried that there's going to be a 13% increase next year because I know it'll come down. I did try and just give a little bit of an idea of where there are challenges that are less in our control. And that is where development services doesn't have the reserves to bring those numbers down. I could have probably brought development services down more if I had reserves to draw from to make that more reasonable. Also in solid waste, those are realistic, reasonable numbers coming through. But solid waste typically has anywhere from $700,000 to $1 million worth of surplus. It's one of our larger budgets. So, the solid waste number again is high. I know that'll come down. My shorter answer is we'll probably have something there when we bring that back to you, 6 to 8%. It's not going to be 13.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I was just concerned that with the use of reserves this year to reduce taxation, that it's going to be a hit the following year and that we're going to appear very sort of erratic in our tax percentages, shall we say, over the coming years. So when 13 obviously jumps out, but if you're confident that at the end of the day that's going to whittle its way back down to sort of a 6 or a 6.5 or something, then that is maybe a little more palatable. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm very used to those future numbers creating a bit of fear. There is a challenge with the regional district to try, and without the surplus, the municipalities don't have that same challenge. When we did this work with the board over the last few months, I did bring a reserve trajectory forward. And I think there was about $6 million over the 5 years that we're using of reserves. But what we really tried to do, I call it the ladder approach or the steps approach. So when we're using the reserve, and if we're using $600,000 here, we're using $400,000 the next year, $200,000 the next year. So that impact, there is still an impact, but it's not going from $600,000 to zero. It's slowly stepping it down so that it's more reasonable. And the board has been presented a number of times with the solid waste impacts. That's where solid waste and building standards, development services. That's where right now the biggest challenge is coming in. I'm less concerned about using building standards reserves to offset costs because there's not infrastructure. There's not a lot of assets in development services. Solid waste is our largest budget. We're really working hard as a staff to bring board something reasonable so there's money. So we don't go from $10 million in a reserve to nothing. So we're trying to do that work again with the board this year.
Director Goetz.
Is this the last year that reserves are going to be used to bring down the budget, or is it next year?
So there's actually reserves being used in solid waste and development services for the 5-year plan.
Okay.
Every year, the 5-year plan.
Okay, just asking. Thank you.
Yeah.
Anyone else have any questions, comments for CFO Fox at this moment? No? Okay.
All right, so that would then take me through, I'm not going to go through detail through the capital. It's important to note, and I mentioned this earlier, that 51% almost of our funding for our capital projects is coming from grant funding. We do have somewhat of a rating system so that all the capital that is required hits that 5-year capital plan. We have a 5 to 10-year capital plan. We present the 5-year. We have to present a 5-year funded capital plan. There are projects on that list. It's important if you're curious over the 5 years, sometimes we have a project that we want to have on there. We want the board to know it's needed. And that's why we put the funding column in there, because if it's other grant funded, that could very well mean that we can't do it unless we obtain a grant. And you certainly can come and ask us that or put that question to us. We do try to meet with each electoral area if it's in your area, and you should be aware of most of that there, but just wanted to point that out. Capital spending, as we build out and the asset management planning gets better, you're going to see this a little bit more of a consistent planning schedule for our capital spending. Right now, it's kind of bounces around, and we're really working on trying to build the depth of our capital plan. We have a page in there that has all the projects that are over $250,000. Oh, jump back to the reserves. And then we do give you the reserve schedule. We give it actually in detail of here's the opening balance, here's what's going in, here's what's coming out. And then we have a little adjustments column. It's important to note in the adjustments column that there are some reserves that when I came on, such as the library, such as solid waste, that they actually only had an operating reserve. Well, we know a majority of the costs that are spent in there are capital. So I have made discretionary changes that we've talked about before, but have moved money from operating to the capital, and it directly supports the capital plan. So I haven't done that to a point where I brought that to the board to say, hey, do you support me moving $4 million out of solid waste operating budget to capital? I have actually done that knowing that the capital is there and being supported. However, if you are concerned about that, please look in that column. And during the finance committee meetings or during other board meetings, we certainly can bring back further information to support the decisions. It's just I don't have enough time to bring back all of that detail for you to review at this stage. You can see that, and if I had 24 in here, we actually dropped down from 24 to 25. And then we slowly start trying to build up the reserves over the 5-year plan. It can be a little bit misleading because a lot of the reserves that are sitting there in solid waste, library, general government services, if you really want to understand the breakdown of those, you need to go to the detailed reserve spreadsheet, because a lot of that money of the 32 million is weighted in, 5 of those reserves. The rest of them are pretty low. You can see that's that reserve swing that I was talking about as we're trying to build it back up. We don't spend a lot of time talking about this, but we do have some parcel tax that is in South Green Lake, Loon Lake, and Monty Creek to pay for capital. The Monty Creek one will be new in 2026. We also have parcel tax for utilities, and we don't spend a lot of time talking about that, but that is definitely there for you to review and see. Again, that is parcel tax that is collected to pay typically for, there are a couple cases where it goes beyond that, but most of the parcel tax is there and collected through referendum and to support the capital that's purchased in those utilities. We in the regional district are unique and have kept some parcel tax set up for fire departments. That is not typically the case. Typically, they're only for water utilities. We've shown you that. So at that stage, I want to turn it back to you. We're really here today to have the board endorse and approve the plan we've been building for since September last year. We've had lots of opportunities to work with the board to make changes, to take into the year-end considerations for the adjustment. I think we have, I feel pretty honored to work with the board that we have here and the staff that I work with and my finance team. You can hear from the audit that things are going in the right direction. We're being recognized for the work that we're doing. I'm feeling really good and really solid about that. I want to do more work with the board to talk more about reserves over the next year and things that we can do to stabilize our tax rates over the next year. We have the ERP as far as the finance team and the IT team and a number of us working on over the next year. But as far as big projects, that's pretty much it for us. We're at the 5.9% global tax rate, and we just want to know if the operating plan we put in front of you and the capital plan is sufficient and we can move forward from this point.
Well, first of all, a big thank you to you, CFO Fox, to your staff for your work since, for what 9 months, must seem like 9 years over the last, since September of last year. Thank you for your many opportunities for members of the board to not only meet with you privately and staff, but to hash it out here in public, which is all part of the transparency and the process that we are trying to establish and continue on for residents so that they can see exactly how these decisions are made. So I know Director Goetz has another question, and if anyone else has questions or comments, now is your chance, Director Goetz. After what? Oh, okay. Does anyone else have any, Director Sarai?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, CFO Fox, for that presentation and the hard work. My question, when you showed the other RDOs, I think there's 10 of them, and they went from 0.95 to almost 12.2. And I know their sizes are different of how many directors are there. Do they also use surplus to keep their, like, are we aware of them using surpluses? And the other thing is what are the challenges they have? Do they have the same type of challenges, solid waste, of keeping revenue and cost the same as us? Are they very similar?
Thank you, Chair. Through to the board. So, and I may defer to Jamie at some point here, but I have not done the due diligence of comparing each of the regional districts. There are definitely uniquenesses between them. I would say your first question about reserves, I did not poll them to see how many of them might be using reserves. I do know, though, when I met with the regional district CFOs at Regional District Day during my GFOA conference, that we did briefly talk about reserves, and it was something that most of them shuddered at. There's not typically a great case for using reserve funds to offset taxation, because the minute it goes away, it's a false sense of security in numbers. So as a financial person, that is definitely not something that is a recommendation or a best practice. And I would say we did have a lot of discussion and debate, I think, in the finance committee, and a few conversations in this regard. Where we got to was development services reserves was less risky, less capital infrastructure needed that support. And the community assistance reserve fund, I think in the same token, did not have anything identified for use from it. Those areas there are the safer ones. Other than solid waste and development services, the other areas are really small. I'm not as concerned about those. Yes, sir.
Okay, and I could add to that. Thank you through the chair. I guess back specifically to the solid waste reserve, I would say comparing with other regional districts on the solid waste front is complicated because the services levels are very different in how they're funded. I'll use an example of some of the Okanagan regional districts. They're fairly small geographically and they have no taxation for solid waste. It's all funded through user fees. Going back to our TNRD budget, historically, we have not used any reserve funds in solid waste to offset taxation. We had opposite problem, if I can call it that we had years and years of significant surplus. And one of the concerns from board members around this table was that our reserve fund was getting very large in solid waste. And this is the rainy day, I guess, if you will, that we're using it to balance that taxation so we don't have to see as big increases. And the major cost implication was that new contract award where just the operating costs have gone significantly higher, 30% higher 2 years ago when we awarded the new contract at the end of the 5-year term.
Any other questions or comments? Oh, Vice Chair Smith?
Nothing on the actual budget itself. I just wanted to give a shout out to our staff, CFO Fox and Colton, for the presentation they had at LGLA. I had a council member that attended and said it was incredibly well done on the part of our staff. And thank you for making us look good because it hasn't always been that way. So we appreciate it.
Any other questions or comments? All right, we do have a recommendation. Who would like to move that? Director Stankey, seconded by Director Bass. Any discussion on the recommendation? Which is that the board approve the 2025-2029 5-year financial plan. Questions, comments? People can sense maybe a break coming up here. Okay. No questions or comments. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That is carried, and we will indeed have a 5-minute break. I'll see you back here in a couple of minutes. We are moving right along to item 10.4, Dangerous Dog Control Service Amendment Bylaw number 2865. We do have a recommendation. Director Goetz did that and Director Ranta seconded. Thank you very much. Any discussion on this? Seeing no hands up, all in favor?
Yay.
Anyone opposed? That is carried. Item 11.1, temporary use permit application number TUP 76. We do have a recommendation. Thank you, Director Ranta, seconded by Director Morris. Any discussion on this item? That is that TUP number 76, the request be denied. Discussion? On the question, all those in favor? Anyone
Aye.
opposed? That is carried. 11.2, temporary use permit application number TUP 77. Director Bass, seconded by Director Newstader. Thank you. Discussion? Anyone have any questions or comments on this? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That is carried. 11.3 ALC application number ALR 239. We have a recommendation. Director Thorpe, seconded by Director Smith. Thank you. Any discussion on this item? On the question, everyone in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That is carried. Item 12.1.1 CAO Verbal Report. Over to you, CAO Hildebrand.
Thank you, Chair. I just got a few items that I would like to update the board on. Number one being the recognition and some acknowledgement for one of our team members. As you may be aware, every year BC Business Magazine recognizes the number of young people across the province in their under 30 category. These individuals demonstrated their great work, impact, innovations, and community contributions. This year, we celebrate TNRD staff member that was recognized for their work. And I'd like to congratulate Mr. Corbin Kelly, our External Relations and Advocacy Advisor, on this accomplishment and thank him for his efforts and hard work, both to the organization and the communities that are involved. So congratulations to Corbin. Secondly was an LGLA update that Vice Chair Smith actually stole from me. So I'm not going to repeat that. But congratulations to both Carla and Colton for their participation in making the TNRD, putting us on the map when it comes to good governance and budget strategy. So thank you to them. I wanted to talk a little bit about our media strategy update. We've updated our social media policy, and there have been some questions about TNRD's use of X or Twitter, and we wanted to give a quick update on our social media usage. Over the past couple of months, we have slowed down our usage of X and started increasing our usage on other platforms such as Blue Sky, which does all the same things as X does. We have stopped using our TNRD and the Film Commission accounts on X, but at this point, we would plan to use TNRD accounts in emergency situations and during EOCs and things like that when we need to reach out to as many residents as we can. Many users have migrated off of X and Twitter in recent months, and our communication staff feel that the platform no longer has the public reach that it once did. Most media outlets that have followed us on X and Twitter have now also moved to Blue Sky, and many local governments have also stopped using and have also made the switch. This is an operational decision, but at the same time, I want to make sure that the board has their say in any feedback or questions they may have as we're transitioning away. So I will please, let me know at the end if you have any questions or comments about that. We remain active on Facebook and Instagram, as well as all of our other social media accounts. Number 4 was just a quick EOC debrief update. Staff held our 2024 EOC debrief recently in Cache Creek and Venables Valley. Staff were provided a tour of the Venables Valley and the Serengeti village by local residents, as this was the area of the TNRD most impacted by wildfires last summer. It gave many staff a chance to tour the damage firsthand and really help understand the impact that it had. Residents who provided this tour were very appreciative of our visit, and we wanted to express our gratitude to the people of the Venables Valley and recognize everything they've gone through in the last year. After that tour, we had a 2-hour debrief of our 2024 operation in Cache Creek, which also included the village CAO and the head of the local ESS reception center. It was a very productive session. Moving to more of a people topic, the TNRD staffing metrics is something we share with the board on an annual basis. As you may recall, we provide this overview every spring to highlight some of the key people metrics and share publicly with the board as this information is comparing year over year. We have an amazing staff team, and I'm going to have General Manager Bennett Arrieta will provide you just a quick overview on a few slides that we have regarding our metrics for 2024.
Thank you. So just as Scott mentioned, this is an overview of our staffing metrics from 2024. As we dive into that, it feels like it was long ago, but only a few short months. We'll look at a few demographics and then a bit of a summary of our labor and employee relations update. Small but mighty team here celebrating Halloween. As some of you may have heard, there was a large group that decided to dress up as CAO Hildebrand, which was an adventure. As we move into demographics, the first one I want to highlight is our staff numbers. We look at this year over year in terms of headcount by employee group. We're seeing similar growth. The bottom blue portion is CUPE, almost 30% of our workforce. So BCGEU is sitting over 50% of our workforce. That's library and IT staff, with our non-union around 19%. So those numbers are steady and consistent throughout the past years, which is looking good. We also look at our age overall, broken out on average for everybody and then by employee group. We're looking at this in terms of risk to retire. So those eligible to retire, we define as over 55. So we're all sitting in a fairly good position with our average age around 45. The group with the, highest age or it's negligible, but BCGEU members are sitting slightly higher and our non-union staff and QP staff are sitting lower. So everything's looking good there, but we look at that to make sure we're monitoring that risk of knowledge loss as our age may increase over time. Another slide we look at year over year is our staff turnover. So turnover is described as the number of staff leave versus hired versus remaining. You can see again broken out by union group. We stayed steady or decreased slightly in QP and non-union. Our BCGEU staff group had a significant uptick in turnover this year, which was largely due to a change in operating hours for our Kamloops branches that opened on Sundays. So that requirement to work an additional shift on the Sundays for some folks, it just wasn't a part of their lifestyle choices. So we did see that as a bit of a blip. We had a similar, I would say, blip, if I'm going to use that word, in 2018 when we did another significant shift of our BCGEU staffing. So consistent with what we saw and good in terms of the outcomes and increased service to the public with the Sunday shift. In terms of overall recruitment, we're continuing to see an uptick in the number of postings or recruiting that we do per year. This is due to turnover within teams, so people moving from position internally. So it's not showing up as an external turnover number, but movement internally. We also are hiring more casual and grant-funded positions, so we can see more activity there in terms of our hiring. And we do exit surveys for staff that leave. Some choose not to complete. Over 2024, we had 11 exit surveys completed, 9 of which said they would highly recommend the TNRD as a great place to work. When we look at wellness and safety, the one kind of piece I put up here is absenteeism, which, some could argue isn't a great factor to look at overall wellness. But we do see a decrease again in the level of absenteeism away from the workforce, and probably to a point that's steady and consistent for the expectation for local government services. Always a bit higher by our BCGEU group, which is that orange bar on the left, because they do not have an ability to work from home. Our BCGEU staff are largely library frontline facing jobs. So if they're ill, they're sick and not working, whereas we can accommodate some flexibility in some of our QP non-union roles that if folks are ill, they do have the ability to do some work from home, which assists in that absenteeism rate. We continue to offer other wellness supports for staff. We have actually 2 different funded employee family assistance programs, one through Homewood Health, which staff can continue to access 24/7. And the BC Municipal Safety Association offers another service during the weekdays from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. that staff can offer access for critical incident stress debriefing. Perhaps the most critical staff group is our paid on-call firefighters. Critical to remember them as a core part of our group here at the TNRD and providing frontline services to our residents. So a picture there of our fire chiefs and our fire staff team supporting them. And in 2024, we surpassed 200 firefighters in terms of our overall recruitment. So that's a big mark for us. We've continued to expand our training and partnerships. So we have a new partnership with Canadian Red Cross, development of a regional training platform. We have supported more training with firefighter training officers in each of the local areas, and partnering more frequently with other fire departments to provide enhanced training to our members. We've made some process improvements to how they receive their pay so that it's more timely. And just a recognition there for folks who have reached federal long service medal awards and have been presented throughout the 2024 year. I'll move into labor and employee relations, just a couple slides, and then we'll have a spot for questions. First one, 2024, again, we're looking at grievances by year in union. You can see there's a a solid decline. Last year, we saw only 2 grievances, or pardon me, 1 grievance filed by BCGU, which was withdrawn. So we are able to have constructive relationships and conversations with the unions to solve issues ahead of time, which helps that respectful relationship. We will move into bargaining at the end of this year. Both collective agreements are up December 31st, 2025. So we are looking forward to that in the new year. Slight shifting gears here, but another statistic that we've looked at year over year is our investment in staff development. You can see we have reached a significant increase in this last year, and I think this is good news. We are investing in our people, and that's where we have the best opportunities to retain and grow as a staff group. We are at a point where we are probably starting to stabilize that a little bit now, and you can see there was a huge reduction in COVID and the years after COVID because there was not conferences and external training events. So we're kind of stabilizing back out with a bit of growth. If you look back to 2019, you can see it was, $107,000 overall investment. So we're kind of seeing that restabilize out at that higher level. In terms of work we've done on a policy and regulation up front, we've worked with the board on the whistleblower policy. We had BDO come in and do an audit on some of our key policies. You'll recall that from last year. So we've got positive feedback that these policies are effective and in place. And we also did a lot of work on some of our administrative policy updates. 2024 saw some changes in regulations, which required increased staff time and effort. As it looks at WorkSafe BC updates were made in the fall. We had the introduction of the Pay Transparency Act. For those that are not familiar, it's small changes in BC which require us to post rates of pay on job postings, which is something we have already done. But we will now actually have to report annually out on what our rates of pay are by gender. So how are the males and females comparing in the rates and pay? And Accessibility Act with the Accessible BC legislation. Our human resources and legislative teams have been working hard with the Accessibility Committee to ensure those requirements are up to date as well. That was it for my quick people update. So happy to answer any questions.
Or any questions you may have from my updates, so please feel free.
Okay, any questions or comments for CAO Hildebrand or on the people? I'm blanking on the new last name and I apologize for that. Any questions or comments thus far? Thank you very much for putting that together.
And just the last point then is our TNRD advocacy tour report. You will see a board report attached to your agenda. I felt like we had a very successful meeting in Victoria, and I'll pass it over to Chair Roden to talk a little bit about the success of that and some of the learnings.
Thank you. We had, I think, a very successful visit to Victoria earlier this month as part of the advocacy framework. As I said to the EA directors this morning, it's a little too soon to be able to answer definitively, did it work? Was it effective? This is the first time the TNRD has ever attempted something like this. As you all know, it came about because we found ourselves taking the same questions and challenges to UBCM year after year and getting our 15-minute speed date with the relevant minister and then coming back and getting a letter 3 months later saying, thank you, it was so nice to see you at UBCM. We certainly have taken your concerns under consideration. So this is really kicking it up a notch. So we went to Victoria. It was the day before budget. We heard from consistently across ministries that they were amazed. We got 4 meetings with 6 ministers in one day, the day before budget. In hindsight, was that a good day to go? Yes, they were all there, though that was definitely a positive. Probably next time we would decide not to go quite so close to budget, but I know that Mr. Kelly had been working very hard for several months, not just weeks or days, but months to line these up. It made herding cats look easy by comparison, trying to make sure that we were getting the most out of our short time in Victoria. So hence we took the 4 meetings on those days. You do have details of the people with whom we met and what we discussed, and we're happy to say that we have seen some motion on some of the items. One of the items that was there at Director Smith's behest was the question on the speed limits through 70 Mile. We had received indications that day, though, that staff were able to speak with us and perhaps advance it, so we didn't end up talking to the minister about that in depth because we were advancing that through other channels. Again, as I said to the EA directors this morning, found that we were given half an hour, but I think a couple of them went over half an hour. Much more relaxed. There were staff there as well. For example, when we met with Minister Popham, she was able, once we discussed our concerns, she was able to say to us, okay, well, while you're here, I'd like to ask you a question. What do you think about, what's your advice on? So she was able to ask us about something that the province is obviously thinking about and try and get our perspective on it. So it was that kind of very low-key exchange, which I found very different from UBCM, which of course you're constantly looking at the watch waiting to get ushered out of the room. So in summary, I think it was a very good first step for the advocacy framework. I think that we got good bang for our buck. The impression I was certainly left with was that we are one of the very few, if perhaps the only regional district that has taken this approach with the government. So I think we made an impression for all the right reasons and showed them, I think the purpose was to show them that we are serious about this. Not that we're not serious when we go to UBCM, but as I said, again, as I said this morning, a minister like the Minister of Transportation, Minister of Education, of Health, they're going to see 120 to 140 delegations in 4 or 5 days at UBCM. It's very hard to stick out from the crowd when you are one of 120 delegations. By going to Victoria, by taking time out, by showing them that we're serious, I think we have really advanced the cause of the TNRD. And the other thing I want to mention too is on a couple of the items, specifically the water, small water systems and the egress routes, the ministers appeared, and the staff particularly, appeared very happy that we have already done a lot of the groundwork and the legwork on those files. We are not going to them and saying, we want you to do all this. We are saying, look, we're prepared to meet you. We're prepared to do a lot of the work. We're the ones who live there. We're the ones who know the area. So I think that by doing that, by showing that willingness to work with them, we have gone a long way in making sure that they know we're not putting too many expectations on them. I think it'll make it easier to get them to a yes. So anyone have any questions or comments? Director Sao.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, thank you to Mr. Kelly and Mr. Hiltbrand for the work on the staff side, but I also like to share again, like I said in the EA meeting this morning, Chair Roden, thank you for your time to represent EAs. I understand, you're taking time out of your time as the mayor of your municipality to advocate for on our behalf on, such as 70 Mile and such. So I do want to say thank you. Yeah, we appreciate that.
No, it's always an honor and a pleasure and a privilege to represent the TNRD wherever that happens to be. And it was very nice to be able to do it in Victoria. So now as a adjunct to that, if you will, something that has come up, and this is again is tied into the advocacy framework, advocating for the TNRD, advocating for the electoral area directors. In December of 2023, we, the TNRD, sent a letter to the province reminding them of the need to recognize electoral area directors and the residents of electoral areas. Very easy for a minister, for example, to remember to pay their respects to the mayor of a municipality they happen to find themselves in. But we were trying to remind them that electoral area directors represent large numbers of people who are not otherwise represented by local government. So we want to ensure that that stays topmost in the minds of ministers and staffers when they are planning visits to what we think of as home and what they doubtless in Victoria think of as the far-flung reaches of this province. So what I've done is I've developed a motion, I've put it up, came out of the EA directors meeting this morning. And I would like to move that the board revise and resend the December 1st, 2023 letter to the province, urging the province to engage with electoral area directors whenever possible and appropriate in recognition of the needs of residents in unincorporated areas. Would someone, Director Thorpe would like to second that? Thank you. Any discussion on this? The original letter from December 2023 is in your blue folders, just to refresh your memories on it. We do not propose putting all the contact names, maybe just the list of the electoral area director names and their electoral areas, just to try and cut it down possibly to a page if at most, if possible, so that it doesn't look too intimidating. Anyone have any questions or comments, or any other questions or comments about the tour to Victoria? Director Middleton.
Not so much on the tour part, well done, but just I agree with not adding all the names and email addresses. And if we look through the list right now, we know there's already changes to what that original list was, and we could see more changes coming forward. So I think it's better off to be more generic rather than that much detail on that. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? I've got Director Smith, Director Sow, and then Director Goetz.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'd just like to mention that as far as I'm concerned, the advocacy trip was a total success. I'm not sure if everyone knows, but the speed reduction initiative has been ongoing for probably long before I got elected. So, and I've been dealing with it ever since day one, practically since I got elected. So, and it's not public knowledge yet, but I'd just like to advise the board that the outcome has been very favorable, and we'll be heading in that direction in a month or two. So thank you.
Thank you, Director Sow.
Thank you. I just suddenly thought about this, the fact that, you know, we're just alphabets and a whole list of electoral areas. If it might make it easier for, in this letter, in this motion, to add one of our maps with the outline of the TNRD, and then just, you know, which electoral areas where, makes it easier for staffers to understand, I think. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Director Goetz.
Yeah, this is for CAO. Do we know if there's going to be another expert panel on wildfire that you were on last year? Because I think most of us noticed that there was a significant difference in the way that the fires were fought in 2024. And I think that group had a lot to do with it. So I'm just wondering if that's going to come back, or if it's any conversation on that?
Through the chair to Director Goetz, not to my knowledge, but I know we still talk a lot. And I think the recommendations that came through from there are still in place. So I think BC Wildfire will be certainly following those closely.
Any other questions or comments? All right, we do have a motion on the floor. The wording is up there. If there are no other questions or comments, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thank you. That is carried. 12.1.2, the accessibility plan, asking for approval of same. Director Bass, thank you. Seconded by Director Hayward. Awesome accessibility plan. So thank you to the committee for your hard work, and thank you to the people who put it together, because that is a wonderful plan. And as I said to someone yesterday, thank you for recognizing that accessibility is not just about wheelchair ramps. There is so much more to it than that. And I think this plan does an awesome job of acknowledging all the many ways that we need to look at and address accessibility. So does anyone have any questions regarding the accessibility plan? No? Oh, Director Haughton?
Well, I just wanted to say thank you for that, because before I got in the state that I'm in, you don't think about it until it happens to you. And I really thank you for that accessibility plan, because I'll probably be needing it. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Haughton. Anyone else with questions or comments? On the motion then. Favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That's carried. 12.1.3, cast your mind back to Mr. Piroddi and his audited financial statements. They have returned, and we do have a recommendation concerning them. Director Bass, seconded by Director Sarai. Thank you. Any discussion on this? Mr. Piroddi has gone. So he's left CFO Fox here to carry the can for any questions. Are there any questions? No? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That is carried. 12.1.4, Indigenous Skills Employment and Training Program. Director Goetz, thank you. Seconded by Director Smith. Any discussion? Nope. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Carried. 12.1.5. All right, get yourselves ready, folks. We've got a lot of recommendations coming up. There are no ands between any of these, so they all have to be considered separately. 12.1.5, Tobiano Cherry Creek Fire Protection Service Establishment. We have 3 recommendations. Who would like to move the first one? First one, Director Sarai, seconded by Director Grenier. Any questions or comments on recommendation 1 regarding the appointment of the Chief Election Officer? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That's carried. Recommendation 2. Director Garnier, seconded by Director Thorpe. Any discussion on the public assent vote referendum taking place on Saturday, June 21st? Director Sao?
Thank you, Chair. This is more just for my knowledge, as I trust 100% the staff has reviewed this, and this is the way to proceed. I understand in Birch Island's fire protection, there was some issues going back and forth. The Ministry of Municipal Affairs ended up being a petition, and understand here now is referendum. Just for my understanding in the future, if we do have these processes, how does that get decided? Thank you.
So the difference between the two, Birch Island, we were expanding the area from Bavenby into Birch Island. So we would have had to have gone back to the entire service area and include Bavenby into that referendum. So the petition was the best and the best method from the ministry in order to proceed. This one would be an entirely new service area. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments on the second recommendation? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That is carried. And recommendation 3. Director Grenier moves that, seconded by Director Morris. Questions or comments? Director Grenier.
Thank you, Chair. Just want to say a big thank you to Jamie, to the TNRD fire staff, and to our volunteer fire staff at the Tobiano Fire Department, which includes people in Cherry Creek. I think it's a well-crafted, well-conceived proposal that addresses the needs of the people in Tobiano and in Cherry Creek. I want to say a big thank you to Dave Monsees, who has volunteered with the Fire Smart Committee and has been a big help in inputting information for us. Yvonne Hillsden, who has been keeping people informed of the process in Area J, keeping people informed of the public information sessions that we have already had. And, you know, with this ever-changing landscape of wildfire, interface fire, structural protection, we have highway safety and rescue issues. It's wonderful that we can present this opportunity to the people of Tobiano and Cherry Creek for their consideration. And I very much look forward to more public information sessions and participation and consultation on this matter. We have circulation information sheets that are going out, 2 proposed information sessions prior to the public assent process. So I think the people in Tobiano and Cherry Creek will be well informed by the time they cast their decision on this matter. So big thank you to everybody and looking forward to it.
Thank you very much. Any other questions or comments? On the question, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That's carried. 12.1.6, these are 5 separate recommendations. Director Goetz, seconded by Director Sarai, that is 1. Tobiano Cherry Creek Fire Protection Service Establishment Bylaw, first and second readings. Questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Carried. Director Ranta, thank you. Seconded by Director Newstater. Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Carried. Move 3, Director Thorpe, thank you. Seconded by Director Hall. Cherry Creek Fire Protection Loan Authorization Bylaw, read a first and second time. Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Carried. Director Hayward moves number 4, seconded by Director Sao. Any discussion? All those in favor? Anyone opposed? That's carried. And number 5. Okay. Director Newstater, thank you so much. That's seconded by Director Hall. All right. Any questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That is carried. Item 12.1.7 UBCM Next Generation 911 Grant. Director Middleton, seconded by Director Ranta. Any discussion on the Next Generation 911 grant for signage, civic signage? And I found out yesterday that this is, we do have a long-standing, I gather it's long-standing signage program for residents, people who have houses who want to put a number sign outside their house. They are number 1225 North Shoe Swap Road or whatever it is. This is also going to incorporate, this new one is also going to incorporate properties that do not necessarily have a structure on them. So that is, please correct me if I am wrong. Mr. Vieira, you're the one who does this all the time. So if I'm wrong, please tell me now, but I gather that this is also going to be able to allow people to identify properties that don't necessarily have a house on them, because we tend to associate things like this with house numbers. Thank you. I'm getting the thumbs up. That is awesome.
I will clarify, yes, that is correct. Anyone will be eligible, but the way we envision the program, the property owner will still need to request the sign and put up the sign. We won't actually go out there and install it. But yes, all properties we encourage to have these signs.
And also, if I may just put in a plug for the electoral area directors to remind, it can't hurt to remind your residents that we do have the sign program available for people with houses that need signage. My son was a dispatcher for the RCMP in Prince George, so did the North District, which is I think 73% of the province. And the number of people who had no idea what the house number was because it wasn't there. I'm at Joe's house. I'm across from the church. That is not very helpful when seconds count when someone's having a health crisis or there's a fire. So just remind them that we do. I think there are some nice leaflets out in the rack by the elevators. All right. So on the question then, all those in favor? Anyone opposed?
All in favor, yes.
That is carried, and we move on to 12.1.8, and Director Haughton, I believe you wanted to move this one.
That is correct.
All right, so moved by Director Haughton, seconded by Director Hayward. That is Canada Community Building Fund Recycling B-Train Trailers. Anyone have any? Director Thorpe.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just a little curious. I don't sit on the solid waste, so I don't quite understand the EA municipal, how it works. So I'm wondering if somebody, I understand that Kamloops isn't part of it, but I'm wondering if somebody could explain to me how municipalities participate in this program, just for clarity.
Mr. Viera.
Yes, through the chair. So yes, this is a regional service that excludes all municipalities and all electoral areas except Kamloops. So the budget that we just passed, the amount of funding from each of those entities, the EAs and the municipalities, is based on the converted assessment from each of those areas.
Supplemental then, could you tell me if our municipal partners are participating in this $781,000 in any way?
Thank you, Chair, through to the board. So the municipal directors participate as a member of the TNRD board, just the way the electoral area directors do. So the TNRD project is funded by TNRD funds. The electoral areas are contributing from the pots of the community works funds that allocated. However, I guess the pooled funds pick up 10% of that allocation. So I guess you could say that the pooled funds would be covered by the TNRD as a whole. The context around the municipalities versus the EAs where community works funds are concerned is a little bit misleading. I think that the way to look at it is the community works funds are given to the TNRD to support TNRD infrastructure, and the policy supports the funds coming in and being divvied up by electoral area based on the populations in those areas. So the infrastructure that's provided and that is requesting for funding is infrastructure that supports all of the services in the areas that we provide.
More question then. Municipalities also get the gas tax funds, right? And is it based on, if I understand it correctly, I'm just trying to get my head wrapped around it. Each area, the amount we're contributing is based on our population, right? For that particular area. Like, for example, in area I think it said that there was like 2,400, which would include everybody that lives on reserve. Otherwise, it's about half of that. So my question is, if municipalities are also getting gas tax funds, and I'm assuming it's a per residence or per property, how are they helping to fund this 781,000? Is it not sort of a bit of a double dip?
Thank you, Chair, through to the board. Municipalities get community works funds towards municipalities to spend on municipal infrastructure, and TNRD gets community works funds to spend on TNRD infrastructure. So they wouldn't mix and match funds for projects unless, for an example, I think there was a project that was a partnership in Merritt where the community works was provided to support that. But other than that project there's not an intermixing of municipal community works funds funding TNRD infrastructure. That wouldn't be something that I'm used to seeing.
If I may, the money we get from the Community Works Fund, it comes to the TNRD, which is 10 electoral areas and 11 municipalities. The TNRD, back in the day, the board, made the decision that we would take that money and we would give it to the 10 electoral areas, and then we would have an 11th portion that went into pooled funds. So all that is how we do it. Some regional districts just take all the money and put it into a lump sum, and then they spend it on things like the B-train trailers if they need them. And so the money does not come to the TNRD for the electoral areas. It comes to the TNRD for the entire TNRD. So that is how the money can be used to fund something that benefits not just the electoral area residents, but it also benefits municipalities, because the money has come to the TNRD. If we did not have the policy that we happen to have to give it to the various electoral areas, that money would be sitting in a pot, and it would be this board's decision to make that decision about that whole pot of money without having to ask the electoral area directors to give some of it back, if you will. So, yeah, it is tricky. I get it. The municipalities, we're not getting out of paying anything. We're not somehow shirking our responsibilities. The money is the, excuse me, the money is the TNRD's to spend on things for the entire TNRD, and that's what's happening to it. So. Director Haughton, I think I saw Director Sau's hand as well. Director Haughton, you're up next.
Yes, thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank Jamie and the operations department on how you financially came to be able to afford 4 trailers this year, 2 of them coming out of the capital works fund and the other 2 coming out of reserves. This way we're able to purchase 4 badly needed trailers. I want to thank you for that, because I know one of the previous directors has been after the board to on these reserves and utilities and how this money is spent, and this is a good way to show that we are doing it very diligently. And one quick question, Jamie, are these the same trailers that we purchased last year, and are they coming from Ocean Trailers in Vancouver?
Thanks, through the chair. That's yet to be determined. We'll go through the same procurement process as last year. So good chance they'll be the same, but hasn't been determined yet. Board needs to approve the funding first.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Director Haughton. I have Director Sau and then Director Morris.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, CFO Fox. I think before you had your explanation, I did have that, similar to Director Thorpe, that line of thought, and I think in my mind now it makes sense that the solid waste to B train is not electoral area asset, they are TNRD assets. And if I may share something, I don't know, that puts me in a new frame of mind to put myself in municipalities' shoes. If the CCBF that they receive for their municipality, they are within our electoral area, for example, District of Clearwater, if they spend that CCBF on a new playground, they don't have a sign, a gate says no area A residents allowed. So the electoral area also benefits when municipality spends their CCBF. So I think that could be another way to look at thank you.
Thank you. Director Morris.
Thank you. Very, very quick. If we look at Area P, surprise, where it's 30% overall, is that based on the aggregate population within Area P geographically, i.e. including our First Nations neighbors as well? I just want to have a sense of explaining clearly the biggest picture here.
Through the chair to the board, that allocation is based on the 2023 population census, which to my understanding does include First Nations population.
Any other questions or comments? On the question then, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That is carried. We have for information, item 12.1.9, the building permit activity. Does anyone have any questions on that? We have some committee report minute drafts here. Does anyone have any questions or comments on any of the drafts? And we have 3 items of correspondence for information. Does anyone have any questions or comments about those? Director Bass.
Just on the first one, they asked for some motion of support. Do we need to do something like that?
Well, I believe they're asking for support for the resolution. If it gets supported at the local government level, it will come to UBCM and people will be able to vote their conscience, yes or no there. Anyone else have any questions on the correspondence? We move to item 15, new business, and Director Haughton, I'm going to go to you.
Well, thank you, Chair Roden. This is to do with in the rural areas where these wind power projects have quickly come upon us, and we can relate back to last year. I believe we've had some informational letters sent to us on some of them that, you know, the idea was out there, and you know, it's going to come maybe one day, and then the government of the day slaps 8 of these through like bang, 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 and with little or no consultation with either residents along the way or land use holders that have access to the Crown lands. And I just want to use the Monty Lake to Falkland one as an example. A lot of the deeded land borders on the Crown land. So to my knowledge, none of these are coming onto Crown or onto deeded land, but they're coming right on the back door of somebody's house or business between the corridor of Monty Creek, or Monty Lake, excuse me, Westwold and Falkland, and then on through. And I would really like the board, Chair Roden, to write a letter to Minister Dix, not against the use of the power, but I think they can do a better job of consultation with the residents and permittee holders of the land before they slam dunk these through Victoria and put a rubber stamp on them. I mean, these all came, as we all know, awful quickly with no consultation. And I'm asking for Chair Roden to write a letter on behalf of the TNRD. And this doesn't only go with TNRD, but goes with all the municipalities along the way where it comes right out their back door. So I'm asking for that, Chair Roden.
So you're making that motion, seconded by Director Sarai. Thank you very much. Any further questions or comments on this? On the motion, then, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That is carried. Is there any other new business? Director Goetz.
Yes, I just want to take a minute. Some people I'd like to thank. I'd like to thank our past CAO, Sean Smith, Greg Lois, Sean Strang, his RCO recovery operations staff, Krista Minar, Cynthia White, and her city staff, my current CAO. My council, Bowen Ma, past Minister of EMCR, Kelly Green, new Minister of EMCR. Support from all of the First Nations bands supporting our flood mitigation strategy. We have secured $60 million of funding for Dike 129 and 130 on March 25th of this month for setback dikes, and this covers 80% of completion. So far, the province has met us with $130 million on our recovery. There's 20% left, and I hope to congratulate the federal government soon for their support because it hasn't happened yet. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other new business? All right, we move on to question period. Are there any questions from the public? We'll all look pointedly at Ms. Moore. No? All right. And we have no need for a closed meeting. So on that note, we adjourn and we will see you all back here tomorrow morning at 9.